Hi again. Thanks for having us on this sunny day in the south. Hope you guys are experiencing the same in the north. And so this is our presentation regarding record label deals, specifically major label record deals, but we'll be focusing on other ones as well, just as part of the entire ecosystem of the kinds of deals that you might end up doing. And I'm here with my colleague, Byron Pascoe, and we'll be presenting that for you. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. We will potentially answer them on the fly, or we might wait until the end. There's going to be a bit of a question period at the end too, so where we'll be taking some live questions, but we might answer some of the chat questions at the same time. So let's get started. So getting the deal. Congrats. Being offered a deal is an accomplishment, but it is not the end. It's actually an invitation to do a lot of work, and it is the first step in a multi-stage decision tree. So you have to look at the context of things, which label offered you the deal, which major, which major indie, or is it an independent that offered you the deal? And then, you have to wonder, do you want to be on that label? And, it's wonderful to be offered a major label deal. And there's a lot of advantages with it, but you have to take a look at your situation as well to make sure that it's the right fit for you and that it makes business sense. And it's not just the business sense, though. There's a real sense of who you are as an artist and what it is you want to accomplish that goes into that. And, all of the things to the people that you'll be working with, but we'll describe that in greater detail. And what are the terms? Like, these are the business requirements of the deal. What are you getting paid? What are you getting paid as an advance? What are your obligations? What do you have to deliver? How much do you have to deliver? What do you sign for? So these are all things that are considerations. If it's a major that's offering you this deal, you do have to ask yourself, would I be better off on an indie or being independent myself? There you go. Would I be better off doing it on my own? So what is a label and why might you need one? So, and I answer this question from quite a bit of experience, having been at 2 major labels in my career and worked with a lot of labels thereafter. True top to bottom record label has the following main units that an artist needs to focus on from a business perspective. Artistic, commercial, creative teams, so your artist repertoire or A&R. Your marketing and promotion team. Then your administrative units. So there's finance. You have your legal and business affairs. And those are the main units that you would be dealing with in a label. And, if you have a manager, if you have management, or you have a lawyer, or you have a business manager, they're going to be engaging with those various departments. Do you have anything to add there, Byron, up to this point?
Sure. I guess some stuff on the previous slide is that the most important part of any deal in entertainment, including in music, including with record labels, is who the other party is. From my perspective, it's better to have a mediocre deal with a great partner as compared to a great deal with a mediocre partner. Like, the most important thing is having the right partner. That's the most important term of the deal. There's someone that you may be with for a very long time. There's someone that you're associated with. There's a lot of credibility that goes along with being associated with a very credible record label partner. And so that's kind of really where it starts, which is, I agree with what you said, and, just even more so on the importance of kind of which one you choose, if you have the ability to choose, or if someone's trying to choose you. In the context of deal terms, so oftentimes what happens is that if an artist is given an opportunity to work with a specific label, sometimes they're given an actual agreement as kind of the first thing to look at, and sometimes they're given a set of deal terms, essentially like a bullet point form list of different types of elements of the deal, which we'll kind of get into today. And so sometimes the negotiation happens with respect to those deal terms. And then once those deal terms are finalized, then an agreement is provided. And the time that a lawyer usually comes in to play, sometimes is a little later in the process, sometimes is right at the beginning. It really depends on the circumstances, but definitely you wouldn't want to wait to have a lawyer involved or someone else involved to help you until you get an agreement. Like it's better to get kind of advice early on when you're discussing the deal terms, because if you're given a set of deal terms and you agree to them, and then you're given an agreement after that, and then you try to negotiate, you're kind of a little bit like stuff out of luck, sort of, because you've already agreed to things that you may not want to once you see the full scope of the deal. And then just to kind of clarify the term major label. So here in Canada, Sony Music Canada, Universal Music Canada, Warner Music Canada, these are the major labels in Canada, and kind of worldwide. And really, like, those labels own and or are distributors for a variety of other labels. There's a variety of different ways that a record label might be connected to a major record label, but really kind of the big distinction that we're referring to is that if you have an offer from a major record label, it's generally one of those three labels, whether it's the Canadian branch or the US branch, or just like, well, US meaning usually like the worldwide headquarters. And if it's not one of those three, it's like not a major label, but there are a lot that are kind of in between, meaning that like they're connected to or like owned by a major label, but the relationship with you is different than what it would be if you were signing to the main major label. So those are my comments so far.
Yeah, and I'd agree with all of them. I'd hop on you got to trust who you're dealing with on the other side bandwagon, because that's huge. It's like, it's not a substitute for having a good agreement, but having a good relationship and a trust level with the other party tends to make a lot of these other issues in the deal go away. Although the problem with major labels and companies generally is that, personnel change at those labels, and people say things to you, and the first person that said it to you meant it, and then their replacement comes in and they have no record of it, or they don't care and it's not in the deal. So that's why you formalize these things in a contract.
Yeah, people definitely go in and out. You're signing with a company, the person who brought you in might leave the next day. I have a bit more jaded feeling about record labels. I've never worked for one. I mostly work with artists directly who sign to record labels. I work with a few artist-run labels, but definitely, I'm not gonna say I haven't drank the Kool-Aid, but definitely have seen a variety of situations where people are, trying to get out of a record label deal because what they were promised wasn't delivered. And, it's very difficult to kind of promise, significant success. There's a lot of factors involved, including luck and timing and just kind of the people you happen to be working with creatively. But if your label partner doesn't even really try and doesn't do what they said they would do at a very base level, it can be very discouraging. Which is why it's so important to do as much due diligence as possible of the record label. So that's a bit of the recurring theme here is, how do you find the right partner? How do you make sure it's the right fit for you at the time with the right project? Are the people that are there, are they likely sticking around? Who are the other artists on the roster? Can you talk to people who've been at that label, who have been artists at that label before? The more due diligence you can do, the better. There's always going to be an element of trust and risk involved, but you can reduce your risk by doing as much due diligence as possible on the company that is asking to work with you.
Great. Okay. So we will continue on here. We had gotten to, what is a label and what are the different components of the label, and how your representatives as an artist would interact with these folks. Let's move on to the next slide. So what is a label's main role, really? Is it A&R? It's a little less emphasis on A&R these days.
Burt,
Not,
tell us what A&R is. What is A&R?
oh, artists and repertoire.
So what is
It
that?
was covered. It was covered in the last slide, but
Okay.
anyway, it just that feels like it was a long time ago now. So it's artists and repertoire, and the A&R person is basically like they are a group of, for lack of a better term, people who scout talent. It's not just scouting, but they scout and develop talent. And I think there's more emphasis on the scouting these days than there is on the development, because what they're really scoping is artists that already have audience, because of social media, artists have more access to audience directly than they ever did before, prior to the advent of social media. For all its ills, it has made a much more direct connection between an artist and their fans. So social media plays a huge role in that. And when looking at, an artist, they look at what their socials look like, how active they are, how many subscribers, how many followers they have, likes, etc. That's an important consideration in whether or not you even get looked at by major label A&R. So artist audience is the other thing they're talking about. Just moving here. And we spoke about the direct connection between artists and fans these days, which, it underscores again the question, what do I need a major label, right? If I have this direct connection with my fans, are they going to help augment that? Are they going to help grow that, and really push it through? And I think there's the case that they can, but you have to look at the circumstances and who it is you're working with, and your growth trajectory as well is an important part of that. So again, they're not looking for a diamond in the rough. They're looking for artists that have a proven audience. So labels' main role, again, advances, financing, the creation of masters. I would say that that's an important part of what major labels do. They are often called, the bank. I've heard them called before. It's not quite the exact same relationship, but really what they do is they fund the creation of content, and that's a very high level way of saying it. My old boss, Dean Cameron, used to hate the word content. He wanted people to talk about music because it becomes it's a little clinical, but when you come to financing and advances, you may want it to be a little clinical. So is that the label's main role? I think it's an important role. Marketing, I think mainly marketing is what a good major record label does. What they have is access to insights, or by that I mean data and research. And actually taking that data and piecing it together, and mapping your audience, knowing who the audience is, knowing where to promote you so as to grow that audience or to solidify that audience. You don't want to turn off the audience that you have too. So insights is a huge part of it. What they have is marketing spends as well. Like these days, the ability for somebody to create music in their home studio, see behind me, as a hobbyist, is like, you can create very high, if you have a skilled person, you can create very high quality music, and there's a very low bar of entry. Whereas 20, even 10 years ago, but let's say 30 years ago, you had to go into the studio in order to get the quality. Like you just needed expensive recording equipment in order to get the kind of quality that is available to people in their home studios now. And I don't think home studios are a substitute for studios. There's certain things that just can't be done there, but like it really does. Everything has really gotten cheaper. So all that to say, the marketing spends that that the record company makes, which were always large, are super important, but they're probably more proportionally important now than they were in the past. The other thing that they have is, they have active sync and licensing departments that are thinking strategically about how to both find opportunities for your music. Maybe it's a commercial opportunity, but it goes the other way too, right? Like they're thinking strategically in terms of how can you make music that will fit into a sync and licensing opportunity, right? So, there's examples of that where, it's sort of been back constructed, but the song Renegade was actually, it was actually kind of commissioned by Jeep Renegade. And it was sort of, then it was put out as a tune, and then it was synced to a commercial. So I don't know if you want to call that inauthentic or whatever, but it made the band very famous. And the other piece of that is, these opportunities are not just opportunities to place your song and make money off of that, but often it's an opportunity for real presentation and exposure to an audience that you get paid for, but also gains you more audience. If you connect with a group of people that like a particular television show or a particular film, that boosts you. And that, that's the power of major labels in a lot of cases. But Byron, you had something to add.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. Probably the main reason why anyone would want to sign to a major label is like the marketing machine, and it is a machine, and it takes a machine to break anything, apart from getting luck with like a TikTok hit, etc. But like my comment about marketing commitments in major label agreements is that oftentimes a major label will commit to a certain amount of money for recording funds, commit to a certain amount of money for an advance, which may be kind of part of the recording fund. But sometimes there's hesitation and just non-committal on a marketing spend, because what they say is, well, we're going to spend money on marketing, obviously, like we're gonna do it because we have this advance to, because we believe in you, et cetera, and we want to promote you. And I find with like independent labels, even though the numbers are a lot smaller, again, depends on the circumstances, but oftentimes there is at least a minimum marketing spend that's being committed. I feel like an independent label kind of they may feel like they have to commit a certain amount of money in the agreement with respect to marketing spends. And a major label has much deeper pockets generally, but are kind of less committal. They kind of, they basically say, just trust me. And, those three words are words often kind of found in music agreements. I mean, they don't actually say that, but like that's what I call them. I wrote a blog about it that I'll post here in the thread. But just trust me agreements are agreements whereby people say, well, we're obviously, we're going to do this. Just trust us. We'll do all the things that we say we're going to do. And so, one of the rules that we have when we're reviewing an agreement is finding out what the label said that they're going to do, and try to turn as many things from like just trusting us to putting it in the agreement as an obligation. And to the extent possible, marketing is one of those things. But yeah, I mean, from like marketing broadly in the context of funds for music videos, digital marketing spend, money to pay, influencers or like kind of micro influencers or kind of larger ones, money towards publicists, which they may have internally. I mean, radio promotion sometimes kind of gets intertwined with that. Sometimes you're involved in a situation where the record label says that we can provide these other services, but it's going to cost you money to unlock those services. And so it's really important in certain circumstances with record labels to know, number one, like what is being provided to me that I don't have to pay for? what is being provided to me that I need to pay for in one way, like one way or the other, and like how is it being paid? Is it being paid from royalties that may be generated? Is it paid, like, do I actually need to pay someone something like out of pocket? There's a variety of different ways, and kind of anything might be reasonable so long as it's reasonable. But preferably, your label partner is committing to spend money on marketing, as in like paying other people to do things, and is also um, ensuring that their machine is supporting you and your project.
Yeah.
So it's okay to ask questions about these things to a record label, just to kind of spell it out what they plan to do. And depending on the record label, major, non-major, somewhere in between, they may just have different ways of committing, but a major label does generally have deeper pockets if it wants to access them.
Right. And I would totally agree with you about major labels not wanting to put these things in as commitments. They're kind of like, to your point, just trust us. But a lot of times that will manifest itself in words like reasonable spends,
Yeah.
and where the determination of what's reasonable is completely in the hands of the label or the people that are spending it, and not in your hands as an artist. You're not going to be able to say it's not reasonable that you didn't, that we only accessed $2,000 over the course of whatever. It's very much slated in the major labels favor that way. That said, they do have the deeper pockets, and when they do go to bat, they tend to spend a lot. So I know what I do know what you're saying about it being frustrating dealing with them, though. But in any event, they have the leverage to just say, well, we're going to keep it vague. So
Yeah.
Okay. All of this to say that the major labels are under tremendous pressure to find great talent. And if you are great talent, then prove their utility to you, because as we go through this, you'll see that there's a lot of this stuff that can either be done on your own or through an indie that doesn't need to be done through a major label anymore. In a lot of ways, the way you can think about it is, that they're a one-stop shop and that they have the money to back these things. So to use Byron's analogy, they're a machine, right? And they're all parts of the machine, so that's part of their utility to you.
One of them is even called Big Machine.
Right.
They're,
Yes.
they're
Right.
they're all machines.
Which
Or
which is
I mean, the other word that isn't as nice is like factory. I mean, again, that kind of goes into not, I don't want to say jaded, but like just how do I want to put this? Sometimes labels, this is kind of on a little side topic, but like, it's very hard. Okay, I'll put it this way. Once you're signed to a label, like, it's not like, oh, now I get to sit back and wait for them to do everything. No, it's like, that's when it gets harder, because you have to demonstrate why you're a priority over everybody else that's already making them a lot of money, or some money, or more than you. And so sometimes there's a mentality internally at some labels of like, well, we have to keep signing people, otherwise we're not relevant, or someone else is gonna, get that artist instead of us. And so, there's a variety of internal reasons why a label would want to sign you, including like their perception publicly as having like a diverse roster, or a roster that, is someone who can, has the latest, thing, the flavor of the week. And you need to make sure, both through the contract, but also the relationships, that you're doing what you can to be top of mind as much as possible. Because sometimes the mentality is like, well, what have you done for me lately, artist? But like, it should kind of be flipped. Like, what artists should say to the label, like, how are you continuing to support me? I chose to work with you. I agreed to work with you. So there's a lot of give and take. And, there's kind of biased perspectives on both sides of it. But it's really about, like anything, having consistent expectations of the other party. And, if you as the artist have consistent expectations of what the label will do, like consistent with what the label thinks that they're going to do, that's a good starting point. And so, you know, when you're talking to a label that is interested to work with you, speaking to them about what their general expectations are of the relationship, goals, timelines, like just the more information you can get about the plan, you know, that's, and if you feel confident in that plan, and then, you know, the lawyer or your manager, whoever can help you to make sure that plan is implemented in the agreement, that's good. But like, it really starts by, you know, I keep saying like due diligence, find the right partner, and then what's the plan with that label, and then having that plan be integrated into your deal, so that if they don't follow through on the plan, or at least try, you know, you might have a way out potentially. Bit of a tangent there, but you know, back to the slides.
Back to the slides, except I want to continue on that tangent for a quick second about something
Okay.
that you said, that artists keep trying to prove themselves relevant within a major label or the major label system. It's like when I was at EMI and we were being acquired by Universal. Katy Perry was the biggest artist on EMI, the EMI family of labels by far. And at one point, she rather defiantly said in the press or at a concert or something, she said, "We won't let Universal take us down." And you know, this is so this is, you know, and I think part of it too is that, you know, with respect to Katie, she was the queen of the label, and she's going to this other massive machine with a bunch of other labels that have, you know, there's like 8 or 9 Katy Perrys in their system. You know, they had Gaga, they had all kinds of star power there, and she was very much used to being treated as number one. Well, you know, I think she ended up having a chaperoned meeting with Lucien Grange, and she came out of that meeting, you know, saying, "Yay, Universal good," because I think everything was told to that artist that no, you're part of the family, like you're still, if not number one, you're like of our best, and we're going to cater to you and all those sorts of things. So like there is all of that to say, though, there is competition within the label, within the you know, the different artists on the label, to make sure that, you know, they stay relevant, and that the marketing spends that we keep talking about are being spent on them and not some other priority or some other artist. How do you become a priority? How do you stay a priority? So important considerations. And that, you know, again, that speaks to, well, do I want to be on a major label where, you know, it's great, they've got all the money, but like if they're putting their entire push behind somebody else who seems to be taking off and completely neglecting my career, then, you know, you may want to be on the networks of the world that were pushing Sarah McLachlan and Sarah McLachlan only. I'm using 30-year-old examples here, 25-year-old examples, but you get the idea.
It reminds me of the movie Air. You see that? With
No, I
you know,
haven't.
there's different companies are trying to get Michael Jordan to you know, be connected to the different shoe companies.
Oh yeah,
And one of them's like,
absolutely.
you know, well, you'll be among the best. And the other one's like, well, you will be like our main talent. You know, so it's like, do you want to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond? Not that any of the major labels are that much, you know, I don't know the exact sizes, but like, you know, do you want to be a big fish in a smaller pond, or do you want to be a smaller, you know, whatever the the other scenario with fish and water, you know? Pros and cons, but some people are more inclined in their lifestyle to have, you know, one or the other, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of kind of recognizing that there are different types of scenarios, and you know what makes the most sense for you as an artist at this time in your life. And it's okay to have, you know, different perspectives on the kind of relationship you want to have with the label, or what kind of label you want to work with. Then like not everybody in your musical life, including like a family member or a person in your band, are going to have the exact same feeling. But like if you're in a band and you all have very different ideas about how your music should be distributed and paid for and marketed, like, you know, figure that out internally first before you know, partner with a record label that's going to take, you know, the mentality of one of you but not the other. So figure out your internal situation before you kind of make that kind of choice, if you have that kind of choice to make.
All right. Okay. So great. I enjoyed that tangent. But
There you
anyway,
go.
let's come back. So I'll just repeat everything so that we remember where we are rather, or were. All of this to say, major labels are under tremendous pressure to sign great talent. If you are great talent, then to prove their utility to you, give you a greater stake in sound recordings. Like, these are the ways in which things have turned, because it's like there are.
84 has been a tough year.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. The the pendulum has swung a little bit in the last few years, where artists are saying, hey, we want some ownership stake in the recordings that we produce, probably in no small part to what happened with Big Machine and Taylor Swift, and the fact that that Taylor Swift afterwards came out and said everybody should own some, they should own their master recordings at the end of the day, and nobody should be able to take that from you, which, I appreciate what it is she's saying, but Scott Borchetta also mortgaged his house in order to fund Taylor Swift's career and help make her into the megastar that she is. She had the talent. It's just hindsight's 2020, and he may not have been willing to do that if at the end of the day he couldn't turn around and sell it to her arch nemesis. So anyway, but they're under some pressure to give you greater stake in sound recordings. I would say certain genres more than others, like for the hip hop genre is like there's philosophically they're very much behind master ownership. They're under tremendous pressure to outcompete other labels. So to Byron's point earlier, it's like they'll sign lots of things, and sometimes it's like they want new talent coming in, because often it's about having enough out there that something's going to pop. That's always been the philosophy. But it's also, hey, let's snap it up so that another label doesn't take it and make it pop, even if we can't. So that happens. So, and I say this tongue in cheek, but let's use this against them or be prepared to walk. But the idea is they have things that they want to accomplish, and you have things to offer them that give you some leverage in these negotiations. And if they really want you, you have some leverage. There are things that you can ask for and get, but it really depends on how competitive it is between other labels and the label that you're talking with for you. And it depends on your socials and their view of how quickly you're blowing up. If you are blowing up quickly, you have leverage, because they have FOMO at the record labels like you wouldn't believe, that keeps them up at night. So that's a true story. I think FOMO came from the record industry. It's the one that got away. It was that Next Option album. So there it is, leverage. There you go. That's all you need. It's a lever and a fixed point.
Very technical.
Yeah, yes. I think it was Archimedes who said that, right?
That I don't know.
He said, give me a lever long enough and a fixed point, and I will move the world.
Okay.
Major label deals, back to them. So what are the deal types that come from the major labels? Traditionally, it's a recording agreement. And what that means is they own the rights in your sound recordings at the end of the day. There is exclusivity, meaning you cannot record for another record label or for yourself while you are under contract with them, and while the exclusive period is on. Eventually, that exclusive period typically lasts for a number of option albums, and it's the record label's option as to when it ends in terms of the amount, but you can limit the amount of options that they get. We can talk about that in some more detail as well. So it's not in perpetuity, the exclusivity, but the ownership of recordings is in perpetuity. The advances are larger in theory, and I would say in practice too. Recording fees are put forward, but they're recoupable. They're treated as advances. And you know, the recording funds rather would be things that are, you know, it's amounts spent on the recording, and typically the record labels have more to spend on that. They have more resources. They have connections in those studios, so that's part of their machinery as well. Is that, you know, they have access to, and producers and studios want to work with the majors because, you know, they're a source of ongoing revenue from them. Now, labels pay for all marketing costs, and it's non-recoupable, and that's part of the business model and the deal, the recording agreement type of business model, is that they pay and take a risk for all the marketing costs, but they've limited their risk on, they've limited your risk on profit by providing a royalty, which we'll talk about as well, but they give themselves a much bigger upside by limiting you to a royalty as opposed to a share in revenues. We spoke about this, multiple options. Oh, you wanted to
Yeah, just a quick jump in to say that, like, not every deal is the same. And so, you know, we're kind of talking in generalities here. But every deal could be a little bit different, or there's just something, it kind of depends on circumstances sometimes. But yeah, so I guess I would say, like, while we're outlining the presentation, some things that are quite common, definitely don't assume anything ever, but definitely don't assume it just because something is common that it's going to be the same case in an agreement you get. Like my favorite kind of example about that is that typically, if someone's given an advance, meaning like an advance against sales, like they're given money today instead of getting that money later on, typically the advance is not paid back to the label if the music doesn't generate the money. But I had a situation once where the label said, yeah, you know, we're giving you an advance, but if the music doesn't make that money, then you have to pay it back to us. It's like, usually it's recoupable but not returnable, meaning you don't have to return it back. But in one agreement, and I had to be like, you know, I was pretty shocked, but like, it was in writing, and I've seen worse, but the label kind of went against industry norms in that case. So, you know, that's just my general comment. Like, everything.
that wasn't a major, was it?
No, yeah. But still, like, pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a lot of things that are ridiculous, but I mean, I guess just by way of example, like, there's sometimes there could be marketing funds that are considered an advance. So, you know, preferably it's not, but it could be proposed to be as like a negotiation tactic, or just because of the leverage that's involved with that the major label has. So that's.
I would agree. Like, it doesn't matter what the deal is called. You've got to look at the deal on its own terms, because it can be a hybrid. You know, I'm setting out these deals, you know, early on in my music legal career. Somebody drew a grid for me, and these are the 3 types of deals that you typically see, and these are the features of those particular deals. And you know, it was clear that not everything is hard and fast. There's a bit of push and pull on all of it, but I would agree. It's like, it doesn't matter what it's called. Sometimes I think the way in which it matters what it's called is if somebody says, we're going to get you a license deal, and they actually send you a recording deal where they own you know, the sound recordings in perpetuity, then you're going to go, well, that's not a license deal. Like, it's more about setting expectations when you say certain things, or when you label something a certain thing. So back to this, which is multiple options in favor of the record label, which means that, you know, you typically, what happens is the record label will sign the agreement with you. There is one committed album that they provide you with an advance for. You deliver the album, but then they may have option albums after that, whether it's, you know, depending, it's 1 to, like, who knows, 4 6 in some cases I've seen. That seems like that could take a lifetime to go through, but they're all periods of about typically 18 months, where if the record label says, and they have a time limit upon which they can say that, but we'd like for you to move ahead with option album 1, which is the second album that you would be delivering to them. Then you have a certain amount of months that they have to pay advances typically, and a recording fee that's usually either the same or a little bit better than the previous album. They're going to treat you the same way in terms of sales, etc. But you have to deliver that album, and it could be 8 to 12 tracks, or it could be more singles, depending on the kind of deal that you have. Sorry. And there are, so one of the things that comes out of that is, look, you want to try and limit the amount of options that you're giving to a record label when you're doing a deal with them. And I don't know that it's a good idea to say, hey, give them no options, don't give them any of your future, because I actually think that labels are incentivized when they know they have that next album, when they got another crack at it, right? But they also shouldn't be in a position where they have you for, and into your, laid into your career. You should have the ability to switch over at some point, or at least, even if you're happy with them, you want the ability to renegotiate. That's, when they start running out of options, that's when the label will pony up with better terms for you if you're having a successful career, instead of the same crappy royalty, the introductory royalty that they gave you at first. Or even if it's not crappy, like, you can do better. So, and you're doing well for them. So you might as well have the ability to renegotiate. They're not going to do a deal that doesn't make the money. They're going to still do a deal that makes financial sense for them. They're going to take some risk, but there's no reason. This is all the leverage tilting back in your favor. So that's a discussion of options. Royalty is another idea, and it's a concept that really comes from that is embedded in a record agreement. It's also in license agreements, although there are different ways to sort of pay out what your fee on a sales basis or money earned basis is. Typically, this is a fixed amount, though, in a recording agreement. It's like, instead of it being variable and deducting expenses up front, which is more of a net receipts, net revenues model, and we'll talk about that as well. And typically, a typical royalty from a major label branch in Canada at this point is somewhere between 15 to 18% of PPD. Do you want to briefly describe what PPD is, Byron? Since I know you'll have a take on that.
3 letters, among others, that should be removed from the music industry because many people. I mean, in one sense, it's kind of like gross. I mean, PPD stands for not like gross as in ooh, but gross as in like money off, like all money generated. It stands for purchase price to dealer. It was kind of a bit more relevant in the day of physical recording, and is kind of inappropriate, but still used by majors in the context of streaming and downloads. It's the other kind of word that's synonymous with PPD is points. So when a producer is saying, oh, my normal rate is 3 points, what they're referring to is 3 of these 15 to 18% that a major label would pay to an artist. Yet a lot of producers, like, there's just a lot of misunderstanding about how this relates to net profit, which is unfortunate because sometimes people enter into deals, or that they got confused about the numbers, and it really negatively impacted what they were receiving. But yeah, I mean, it's essentially like these days with streaming, it's kind of like it's essentially a form of gross revenue. Yeah, but like a physical world where it kind of came from, it related to the amount of money that like the label would get when they were selling it to, like, essentially the next person who sells it to like a store, like a physical store. But because we don't live in HMV and Sam the Record Man anymore, we live on like Spotify and Apple Music. Like, one would think that by now this would change, but it hasn't really.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say that PPD back in the physical day was kind of more like the wholesale price to whatever. So to HMV, you're going to get 15% of what that published price is to the dealer. And so, then they would include discounts, et cetera. Now it's 15% of whatever a stream from Spotify is paid to the label. So,
Which seems ridiculous. But
well, and there was an argument like at the beginning of streaming and some of these streaming deals where Eminem was able to say no, you have to pay me. PPD is on my wholesale price on physical, and I get 50% of licensing fees. So because of the way that the contract was drafted, the court agreed with Eminem's lawyers that yeah, he gets 50% of streaming. And then they went, I mean, that was massive. I know people like Universal that got shown the door over that one. It was, and those agreements were tightened up. And it's in some ways it's reflected in the fact that royalty rates are higher these days across the board, and they're sort of considered blended royalty rates for both physical and digital becoming way more important than physical has for many, if not most artists. But that was something that they had to clarify in the early days. It wasn't necessarily as clear. So another deal type, license deal, which we've spoken about as well. What's the main features of a license deal? And you will get a license deal from a major label as well. Rights ownership.
At least it's possible. We're not guaranteeing anybody any.
Yes, this is right. This is not legal advice, and we're not guaranteeing that you will get a license deal from a major record.
There's no loop back from this party with a record label deal in it.
Right. So there's so the rights, the ownership of the sound recording is by the artist in this case, but essentially there's an exclusive exploitation period for the labels. And that varies in length. It really depends on typically it's a period of years, 5 to 15 years, or until recoupment of advances. That's often the way it works. So it can extend for a very long time. It extends until recoupment, or there's often an option for the artist to pay back the remaining debit balance and take the master recordings elsewhere. That happens too. In Byron's example, there was an obligation to pay back the advance at the end of the period if it hadn't recouped at that point, and that's not typical. I would say that's not typical.
The rest of that story was that we said like a few, well, I didn't say the choice words, but the artist did not sign that record label. Let's keep it at that.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And I think that's what, if they were trying to take that position, it's like, it unfortunately wasn't, it couldn't have been particularly competitive. I'm making assumptions here. And also, like if the label is competing, if you've got indie labels, they'll sometimes say, okay, well, we'll definitely take this on a license period basis instead. And we'll that's a benefit to the artist, and it's competitive advantage over signing with a major label who will own those masters outright for years. So
one of the biggest deals I've ever seen, and I wasn't involved in the deal directly, but was involved with the artist, and well, can't say any names, but biggest deal I've ever seen in terms of numbers, and it was a licensing deal because the artist had so much leverage with this song that was just a massive worldwide song. Got more money than I've ever seen in an agreement. And like, I'm not saying that just to sound like I wasn't involved in the deal at all. But
stop bragging, Byron.
Okay, but okay,
Okay.
I heard about it. Burt told me about this once.
Okay, I'm kidding.
But like, it was a licensing deal because she had so much leverage and could go anywhere, and it was. It's not that it was surprising, but it just demonstrated, it was the best example I had seen of like how you really can use leverage with a major label to get, something quite significant in terms of money and royalty formula, if you have massive leverage, which that person thankfully had.
Yeah, and all my example of that is sort of where the record label was in dire straits, believe it or not. Like at EMI, there was a period of time for about 12 months where they had been acquired by Universal, but there was a whole regulatory process that they had to go through in Europe in order for the deal to clear. And no artist would sign with EMI globally or locally because they just thought, okay, well, we'll wait and see. I don't want to get subsumed into Universal, or that wasn't true for everybody. But the leverage we had to do deals at that time was very, very bad. Like we basically had to throw money at people in order to get them to sign at us. So they're like, okay, throw money at us, and you only get it for this amount of time, or you have to meet a sales threshold, or we get back the money. And some of those deals were done. There wasn't an awful lot of money to be spending on A&R at that time, but if you don't look if you don't look attractive as a major label partner, sometimes none of them are in bad shape right now. In any event, everybody seems to be doing very, very well. But if they need you, then that's when you have to leverage. Just like in the case that Byron was talking about of the unknown female artist who was commanding huge sums of money, and it was on a license deal. Like you would typically expect for the record label to own the sound recording at that point.
Yep.
So there are fewer or no options in a label's favor when it comes to license deals. Not that that's always the case. Like you will see options for futures, but if you have an independent artist who has a track record and they have let's say they own their master, but it was a license deal to begin with, and by that I mean their previous deal, so they actually own the master, so they're going to license the deal, license the album again to a major record label. They'll just give the major record label 5 to 15 years with the license, and then it would lapse. Maybe the artist, I can think of Olivia Newton-John. We licensed a number of her albums, and she was not recording anymore. So there's that situation where it's like we don't expect to have any piece of your future because unfortunately, as a recording artist, there probably isn't one.
Well, and if someone's not alive,
that too.
not I mean, AI is a thing, but if someone has passed away, you're dealing with their like a literally legacy artist because they're dead. There's no new music coming out.
No, that's true.
Not to get muted here, but that's
ONJ was alive when we did the deal, and unfortunately she's now passed. But we did that too. Like there was another one where we did with Stomp and Tom Connors, and he actually said, and if you sweeten the deal, I'll do you the favor of kicking off in the middle of the term and like just obviously boosting sales. and we didn't laugh, but he did, and it was actually pretty funny because like especially catalog has a tendency to sell better when a legacy artist has passed away. So something to think about.
No comment.
No comment. Yeah.
Okay.
But he said it, not us. So
Yeah.
It's fine. Advances against the license deal are smaller in theory, and that's typically true, but Byron has proof to the contrary. Recording fees or recording advances, they're typically none given as advances, and that's typical. But the reason for that is, the artist ultimately owns the master recordings. So the idea is that they're making some kind of investment. But like, and I see Byron, I've seen, it's one of those things where I'm trying to talk about like more traditional license deals. You're delivering something that has been produced and paid for by the artist. Therefore, the artist owns, at the end of the day, this master recording because they've funded it. That was, and I think that model isn't necessarily the case anymore.
Yeah, I mean, my brief comment is that sometimes when someone enters into a record label deal for the first time, they have an existing product that they're pitching that exists, that's done. And the deal might be, we label are going to distribute this existing album, which doesn't need any, maybe there's some like mixing and mastering costs, or maybe you want to pay for like a feature or something that's an add-on, but like sometimes there's no more recording costs or minimal on the first project, but like if there's a second and third album, subject to like an option from the label that they are allowed to, they have the right, exclusive right to be your partner on the next project or two, then in those cases, generally there would be money that's guaranteed to you for the recording if we're working together on those other projects. Again, like it really depends on the circumstances. We're just, we're talking about some of the things that come up. These are the categories of the deal terms, and some of the more common ways they could play out. But really, like when we're looking at a record label deal, we're kind of taking out the little pieces here and there that collectively put together the key deal terms. And these are elements of them. The amount of time, meaning like the duration of the license, how many options a label has, what the sales advance is, if any, what the marketing commitment is, if any, what the recording fund is, if any. And yeah, I mean, I would say typically, but like, I mean, yeah, I'll just say that these are the common things that we see and that are in these kinds of agreements. And if something's not there but should be there, then our role would be to help you to get it in. Oftentimes when we're looking at agreements, it's not just about what's there, it's about what's not there. And trying to help an artist to include in the agreement things that they were promised, include in the agreement things that weren't talked about but they should be entitled to, and to try to make a deal more consistent with industry standards if it's not there yet.
Yes.
So since we're already at 3 o'clock, maybe we can move on to some of the additional highlights, although I'm not sure how many more. I think we're actually near the end here of the planned presentation.
I have it as us being slide 10 of 19, but there's probably about 3.
Yeah. Well, here, go ahead.
Oh, you know what? It might have more to do with, okay, well, don't worry. So again, we'll do this quickly, but the license deal, again, label pays for all marketing costs and they're non-recoupable because you're paid a royalty. They get a royalty, put in a share as well, because that's sometimes the case with, but not typically with major label deals. If the share could be 50% of the profit, or and I didn't have it there, you get a royalty, but it tends to be more generous than the royalty that you would get under a major label recording deal. So they're more in the neighborhood of 20% plus is what I've seen with those kinds of deals, especially if somebody has paid for their own recording costs and delivered a finished product to the
or a 50-50 net deal, like 50-50
or a 50-50 net deal.
Is
right.
probably the most common thing with like an independent licensing situation.
Yeah, that's common with recording agreements with although there's less recording agreements being put out there by indies than license deals, for sure. So another deal type, pressing and distribution, which is a much rarer kind of deal. Ownership of the sound recordings is owned by your label. Distribution deals or P&D deals are traditionally given to labels. And it's not a period, but it's period. Exclusive exploitation period, or actually distribution period is really what it is. 2 to 3 years or until recoupment of advances. The advances are smaller in theory, or they could be larger. I mean, some of the things that I've seen with major label distribution deals is they go a bit bigger because the advances will recoup more quickly. They recoup 100% of everything that they've put out, including marketing money. If they've spent marketing money on a project, those are treated as advances. So they will sometimes put out more money, knowing that if they have an artist that's a sure thing and makes a lot of sales, they'll get that money back in their pocket quite quickly. And it'll recoup costs that they normally are unable to recoup. Recording fees, none, they're given as advances. The label pays for marketing costs. Oh, I don't think this is correct in the distribution setting. They would pay for it, but it would be recoupable. They're often paid for, but they're recoupable. So we will change that. And then the major label takes 20 to 25% as a distribution fee. And that is, relative to a recording fee, that's sort of backwards, right? A recording artist will take 15 to 18%. And the major label really takes that remainder. Let's say it's about 82%. They pay expenses, they pay for marketing, and then they recoup advances. In the distribution, it's like their margins are much thinner at a major record label. So what are the advantages of certain deals versus one another? Whether it's a recording agreement, there's huge marketing departments that are going to put their leverage behind owned repertoire. And by owned repertoire, it means, artists that are signed and that you own their sound recordings. More money is just spent against them because it's a better bet. True with license agreements as well, but again, the more they own your sound recordings, the more in theory that they're going to push your sound recordings. They have alliances with other media companies. So if you're Disney, your company is the star maker machinery. And I've seen artists go through this, or at least be pitched this. It's like they aren't going to do license deals with artists that they're not going to ultimately own the master recordings for, because it's a whole program, and they don't want to lose rights to something when they're making an artist money or making them a star in the film and television world. And then, to the idea that they would lose their rights to their sound recordings after having made them huge, it's kind of anathema to the Disney type model. So license agreements, the advantages, you get the advantages of working with a major if you happen to get a license agreement from a major. Somewhat less engagement, like I talked about, less incentive. There's few or no options in the label's favor, although that can vary. I'm not repeating the rallying cry of Taylor Swift here, but I meant to say you never give up master ownership. Masters revert to you upon expiry or termination of the license period. And so with a distribution deal, you don't give up your master ownership. Masters revert to you upon expiry or termination of the distribution period. Get changed again. And that's mainly it. I mean, there's an awful lot that's on you. In a distribution deal. You become a label. You're responsible for marketing, or you're responsible to pay somebody else to do it for you, or you give up points on that if you have the major labels department do it, and maybe you don't like their marketing department because they don't give priority to distributed product, they give it to own product. So those are all considerations. So should we just jump through these, Byron, since we're sort of short on time here, or we're over time?
Yeah, let's give the highlights.
Give the highlights. Okay.
Just play the hits. Just play the hits.
Play the hits, man. Know your value to a label. We went through all of that. They want to sign you. If you are a great talent. I guess the other thing I would say is be great, or be a desirable artist. Don't overvalue yourself, but don't undervalue either. So you need an assessment of that. Know why you want to be on a label, right? Know whether you want to be on a label that is interested in you. Like, you may need to be on a label, but it might not be that you are you align with that particular label that has an interest in you. So think about that too. Is it a fit? What have they done with other artists in your genre? Is that what you want done with your career? Moving on here, know your label play, right? How you can do, am I a major label artist? What are they doing that I could do or get done for less of a cost to me? Are there things that they would provide that I would get nowhere else? What am I giving up in terms of artistic control to gain these things the major label is providing? So those are all important considerations. Is it truly a major label? Am I signed to a Canadian subsidiary with some loose promises that things will be released in the US? Talk to and meet the people in the US is an important thing. And, you know, Byron's smirking because, you know, we've gone through this recently with an artist that will remain, you know, and, you know, it's hugely important for artists that they get known everywhere. Like it's a bigger thing than that their local label pays them more money in some cases because they want to see their career happen on a global level. They think that they can do that, and that's more desirable to them. And longer term, that's better thinking anyway. It's like, you know, you want to succeed outside of Canada, just have a label that will help you do that, and you don't need so many Canadian dollars in your pocket. You'll be, you know, you'll be getting paid in rubles. Well, I shouldn't say that. You'll be getting paid in American dollars. Let's put it that way. Am I an indie label artist? Like, you know, these are some of the things that you would want to consider. I would guess that, you know, most major labels wouldn't be interested in you if you didn't smack of major label, but, you know, these are the kinds of things you have to consider. Like, you know, I'm just trying to think of some artists that didn't necessarily fit the major label bill, but are definitely, you know, now major label artists. Her name escapes me. Phineas and who's that artist?
Billie Eilish.
Billie Eilish would have struck me as like more of an indie artist than a major label artist at the time, but who knows? Am I a DIY social media artist that can put out my own music on my own and have it successfully reach an audience? And by going with the label, am I potentially killing what makes me special? Does the label have a plan to avoid this happening? You know, like if Billie Eilish thought I am, you know, I'm a special artist, I'm unique, you know, I don't want to be like other major pop stars. You know, I want, my audience is different. Like there must have been some sort of plan to not, you know, kill the magic, as it were, by being on a major label. So lastly, and this is what we started out with too, trust. You must have trust in who you're dealing with at the major labels. And no trust, no deal. That's what I would say. Again, to Byron's point, better to have a mediocre deal with you know, a partner that you trust and you think is great than to have you know, the best deal or on paper with you know, folks that you don't trust and that there's no stability there. You don't know if what one person is saying to you one day will happen the next, or if that person will be gone. And so now we're at the question period. We hopped through that. And so how have we done with the questions? It looked like you answered a lot of the questions while we were going through it, Byron.
I think they've all been answered. But if anyone wants to, if anyone was saving some questions for the end, feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A section. I think just one other comment that came up in one or the other place was about label deals in the era of streaming.
Right.
You know, which kind of relates to a variety of things. Number one, there is so much music being put out every day. I mean, the number I was using for a while was 100,000 songs a day, but I saw something recently where it was like 140,000 a day. 140,000 songs a day that you're competing with. And, you know, because there's really no barrier to entry, anyone can get music up on any platform. You know, through the programs like DistroKid, CD Baby, TuneCore, etc. It's just a lot harder to kind of break through the noise or whatever analogy you want to use. And so, you know, working with a record label, whether it's major, minor, or somewhere in between, guess it's not called minor label, but like, you know, an indie or a major. The point is that the greater likelihood of success, or you know, working with a partner creates a greater likelihood of success. And you know, is a bit of a chicken and egg thing, because a lot of labels don't want to work with you unless you've had success. If you've had success, then why do you need the record label? So it's a bit of a back and forth thing. But you know, if someone has, like, there's an artist that we work with who's never put out a song on a platform, but did well on TikTok, never put out a song, and then got offered like a major record label deal in the States. And their first release was like through a major label, like first song. It's crazy. It's not crazy. It's just kind of like what happens sometimes. But like in that case, if that artist wanted to start their own, you know, career without a label behind them, you know, they'd have much harder, you know, chance of breaking through. It has to be the right fit, the right partner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, in the era of streaming where there's so much competition, having a record label, again, I haven't drank the Kool-Aid on it, but like having a record label is, you know, is one of the factors that can help you to create and have a career that's growing and sustainable. It's not a guarantee of anything, but it definitely can increase the chances. It also, you know, so that just, you know, that's my initial comment on how streaming, but more so like access to the world and audiences, how that, you know, relates to whether you should be working with a label or not, or whether, or just about the value in doing it. You know, as compared to sometimes, and you know, Burt, you could speak to better than me, when like, you know, you had to have a record label, unless you wanted to sell your CD at your local like HMV, but like, you know, the labels were more, you know, gatekeepers back then compared to now, but they still play, you know, a significant role in having the bank to promote and push songs. So, you know, their value is different, but it can still be there. But it has to be the right partner, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I do think that the royalty rates, if someone's getting paid, you know, someone had a comment, so am I getting 15% of the 0.004 cents? Or, you know, like it just, it's a very small number. You know, you have to, if you, for making money from streaming, you have to have a huge amount of streams, whether you're independent or with a label. Like you're not, no one's going to make money off of streaming if there aren't significant numbers. And you know, the question, the pitch from the label is, will working with us, you'll be able to get, you know, have a greater likelihood of getting greater numbers and greater fan bases and real fans and super fans who pay a lot of money. Yeah, we're going to take a big chunk of that, but you know, with our involvement, you'll be much further ahead after we've taken our fees compared to what you would have been like on your own. That's their pitch. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but that's their that's what they're saying sometimes.
Yeah, right. And I would agree with you that it used to be more the case that, you know, the major labels were gatekeepers. Beyond being gatekeepers, it's like, you know, they could push radio to put their stuff on the radio when radio was more important. They could push retailers to take emerging artists because they wouldn't give them, you know, the next Celine Dion album if they didn't take, you know, whoever it was. I'm trying to think of a Sony artist that was an emerging artist at the time, but they could make them take it. And there isn't that same level anymore. And then you have the whole phenomenon of TikTok and other social media that is, you know, in some ways breaking artists. It's not clear whether they're going to have sustainable careers. You know, sometimes it feels like, no offense to anybody, but some of these things feel like a stunt sometimes, or a one-off. And you know, labels are supposed to be in it for the long-term development of the artists, but they're less gatekeepers now because things like that can happen. I also like the way you describe, you know, major labels and minor labels. It's kind of like major and minor chords. You talk about diminished labels too, or augmented labels. I think I worked at a diminished label once. So there you go.
Gotta have some music analogies here.
Exactly.
You are the musician among us.
I'm sure there are people
I mean, between you and me.
tuned in. Okay, there you go.
Maybe they're not.
There you go. Okay, well, I don't know. Is there anything else? Any other questions that we can answer, Byron?
There's just one more in the thread here that I'm just writing out, but maybe you can speak to it. The question is, so in order to have leverage as an artist to get signed, you would need to have already released some songs or have something to show that is your creation, question. Or is it still possible to have a label interested with you with just covers or live performances of other people's songs? My initial comment is like, there's no one path, right? I mean, my recollection understanding is like, in terms of Justin Bieber's discovery, like that involved cover songs on YouTube, I believe. But for every artist we deal with or work with, are involved in one way or the other, they all have different kind of stories. But for the most part, it's putting out music, creating an audience, and a record label, if they want to get involved, it's usually because there's an existing fan base that the record label thinks that they can multiply in great numbers by inputting their creative team, marketing experience and money, other producers that they're connected to, other songwriters are connected to, send you to a songwriting camp to create something better than what you've done, but still, within in your lane. So, just because one artist made it a certain way, however you define made it, doesn't mean that that's the same for you. And, someone is probably more likely to make it if they, proceed in a way that hasn't ever been done before. So, there's kind of value in being different from how other people have kind of elevated their careers with a record label. Burt, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that covered things.
Okay. So on the screen here, there's a couple links to emails to us, our website. I've posted a few links throughout the session about our mailing list. Oh wait, did I send that to everybody? Sorry, I'm gonna put that to the group. There it is. There's the mailing list. Mailing list for our website. Put out some links to our blog, LinkedIn, Instagram. So however you like to digest content, we're around as a law firm. It's called Edwards Creative Law. Burt's based in Toronto. I live in Ottawa. We work with people all over Canada to help them with record label agreements and otherwise. But obviously the focus of today's session was on record label agreements. But if you're looking for some more information about other topics in music, please feel free to check out our blog. And if you have a follow-up question for us, feel free to reach out to Burt or myself or both. And we'd be happy to kind of continue the conversations in future. And I know we mentioned right at the beginning before not everybody was here, but this presentation is not legal advice, but it is legal information. Burt, over to you to close it out.
Okay, yeah. Again, that is our presentation for today. I will reiterate what Byron has said, which is, please contact us if you have any further questions, and we'll make ourselves available to you. But thank you very much for having us today, and we look forward to working with some of you folks in the future.
And check out CION for more programming. I forgot about them.
Yes. Check out CION, and thanks so much.
The organization putting this on.
The
links we sent you were all about our law firm, but more importantly, Samuel can speak to what CION's up to.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Byron and Burt. Yeah, no, this has been fantastic to be a fly on the wall for this discussion. I feel like my hands cramped up from all the notes that I take, but this has been phenomenal. Like Byron said, always keep an eye out on our social media accounts. We'll be doing similar partnerships in the future with Edwards Creative Law and other organizations on music licensing and all kinds of things within the music industry. So I really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much for joining us, and take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.